education of BIM topics for the construction industry professionals here in Mexico primarily. And I'm also a part of 1S2X. So I'll be today your host for this webinar. And let me tell you, we have a very, very interesting discussion ahead, all right? So it's time for us to get to know our guest of today. So our guest today is a creative that has delved into multiple fields that range from graphic design, furniture, photography, videography, architecture, and even app development. So I wouldn't be surprised if they say that they're not joining NASA to become an astronaut or something like that, because they truly have an impressive set of skills and an impressive career so far. With a bachelor's degree in architecture from the Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University and a master's degree from Harvard University, our guest has built an impressive career in the field of architecture and design that is backed up by multiple accolades and publications of her work. He has worked as a senior lead in architecture at WeWork, as an architect in Morphogenesis, and is currently an associate at Handel Architects in New York City. But in addition to that, our guest is also a co-founder of Studio Wood, which is a successful furniture and interior design firm that is based in India. So with a detail-driven and systematic approach to design and a commitment to ongoing learning and development, Sahej Bhatia is a sought-after expert in architecture and design. So everybody join me to give a very warm and a virtual and remote welcome to our guest of today. Sahej, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for that very generous summary of my of my work. Nice to meet everybody. Excited to talk about the topic we have today. We have some really compelling questions. We're gonna really compelling thoughts we're gonna talk about, and talk about how we as a firm have been using AI, what I've been doing in that field, and what I've observed, its pros and cons, etc. And we'll try to keep up with the pace and take some questions if possible. Thanks, Eric.
My pleasure. So before we begin, I would like to tell the audience that if at any given point in the conversation you have a question, please put it in the chat box below, because we're going to be taking some questions at the end. We're going to be having a Q&A session. And if those questions don't go answered in the live session, after the fact, after the webinar, our experts will be reaching out to you, because we don't want any question to go unanswered, right? So that being said, like you mentioned, Sahej, we have a very interesting discussion and a busy schedule ahead. So shall we start?
Good.
Perfect. So I was able to give the audience a sneak peek and a little glimpse of your professional career so far, but what better than to hear it from the man himself? So let's reel back to the beginning of your career. I want to know, what was your first architecture job and what was the experience like? And can you give us like a quick rundown of what happened after that?
Yeah, of course. I graduated in 2014, but I started working in 2013 because we had this one-year apprenticeship when you're in college. And that's when I joined Morphogenesis, which it's a contemporary design firm in New Delhi, and worked I guess that's the maximum I ever worked, because I remember I had like a big portfolio at that time, saying I was putting everything in the portfolio. That was a fun time. That was my first foray into working for a professional corporate firm. And then 2016, 17 around, at the same time, I also kind of, with a bunch of friends, co-founded, as Art mentioned, Studio Wood, which is a bespoke furniture and interior design studio. And what's funny is at that time, despite my work, I was also dabbling with Studio Wood stuff. So I hope nobody from Morphogenesis is on this call, but sometimes I used to go on my lunch breaks to my Studio Wood project, which was like, that was me, myself. So it was all the burden was on me. So I used to go in the mornings, I go into office, work, in the lunch break, go to my other project. After that, come back to office, and then at night, go back to my site and then come back. So it's basically sleepless nights forever. But it was such a great experience working for a firm and then working for yourself. kind of changing the scale from architecture to interiors and furniture. And then in 2016, I decided I wanted to, break out of that mold too. I get very restless sometimes. So I applied for the master's in design degree at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. I got in, basically my degree was in design with a focus on art design in the public domain. So those was 2 years where I completely left the stuff I was doing in India, pivotal change in the US, trying to learn more about technology, more about public space making and stuff like that at my master's degree. Then 2 years later, 2018, I joined WeWork, which was quite a spectacle, to be honest. It was a very challenging experience, but somehow I felt I wanted to do something different once I was at WeWork. So I was there as a senior lead architect. And soon after, in 2019, I started Handel Architects, and I've been there ever since. And at Handel Architects, I run the visualization group, which talks about visualization and these AI models and stuff like that. But the office's primary typology of work is multifamily residential. So, 500, 700 unit high-rise buildings and stuff like that. So a lot of my day-to-day goes in that, but also at the same time, trying to go as like a design technologist as well.
Yeah. I would also like share with the public here that you've also had experiences as a photographer, like also you had some experiences as a videographer. You also taken a jab at art, right? So I mean,
yeah,
like I said,
sorry,
go ahead.
Carry on. No, I completely forgot. I do dabble my hand a little bit in art and photography and videography. Photography and videography, it's been a while since I've done that, but art I do. I think at the end of the slide deck, maybe you have a link to some of the stuff I do. But yeah, thank you for reminding me.
Yes, absolutely. So as you can see here, we have some more projects that Sahej has been working on. So can you tell us a little bit about these projects that we have on screen?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting project for a client in Noida and Delhi NCR. And this was also featured in Architecture Digest a while back, I think 2-3 years back. And it was a really interesting floor plan and layout. It was an apartment complex, and we had a very interesting brief, trying to make it like a gallery space and stuff like that. It was a fun project. You can keep flipping through some of the other projects if you want. I think these two projects, which the one on the left, it's 595 Dean Street in Brooklyn, which is where I stay. And the one on the left is 25 Lexington in White Plains, New York. I was involved on the left side, I was involved in some of the interiors of the building. And on the right side, I was involved in the massing, enclosure, facade design, and stuff like that. And the right side rendering is also by me. The left one is a professional render.
Excellent. So as we've seen here, you've worked with very important companies over the years and have very important experiences that have informed your work today. So I want to know, from your perspective and your experiences with these companies, why do you think that so many firms, and why do you think that so many architects in general are turning towards looking to computational design and automation to include them in the workflows in the industry?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question, and I think it has a pretty obvious answer, right? It makes our tasks more efficient, right? When compact discs came out, we didn't insist on using floppy drives, did we? For the younger audiences, a floppy drive is like an enlarged SD card, and a CD is like a plastic shiny thing. I'm just kidding. But a fun fact. Sorry, you were saying something.
No, I just laughed.
Yeah. So, well, fun fact. The computers really had its applications being used in other professions somewhere in the 60s, and it took architects a pretty long time to realize that, this might have a major impact on our profession as well. And I believe the advent of computers in design and architecture related fields only started to show a little bit in the 80s. And, there was a full realization only beyond 90s and stuff like that. I mean, I remember in college, I mean, we still do that for different reasons, but first 2 years of colleges, we had no computers. I don't know what's happening now. Maybe they're in the first 2 years, the computers have come in. But, we were a little late to the game when it comes to this computational power. So in general, however, I mean, computational design has opened up obviously more avenues for creative exploration and in some cases buildability of that creative expression. And we live in a competitive global environment. Everybody wants to be ahead of the curve, and we should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think we have been late to the game. Like even the fact that our industry is one of the least digitalized in the world, besides agriculture, which I mean, of course, in agriculture, what can you change, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that we are still lacking behind, despite the fact that we use technology every single day, it's a very telling on the skills that we still have to encourage in our industry. So for this specific, I mean, when talking about the topic of integration of technology and understanding how can we use it for a maximum benefit. We know that the concept of artificial intelligence itself is not new, and we have been talking about it for a lot of years now, alongside like augmented reality and stuff like that. But it has definitely gained popularity in the last 5 years or so. But specifically in our industry, we have seen a myriad and like a boom in the tools that utilize artificial intelligence to maximize or like to optimize some specific processes. Like, for example, in public spacing, like urban design, generative design, like, I don't know, bidding processes, stuff like that. So there's one in specific, which is like the most popular right now, the hot topic, which is the image creation engines, right? Which you are more than acquainted with, which are like DALL-E, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, etc. So I want to know, what made you interested in using AI, specifically these engines, in the task of visualization? And why not, for example, continue using Enscape, which I know you're very good at as well, or why not just using like the traditional way of visualization?
Yeah, I mean, again, great question. I guess what intrigued me most about generative AI, as it's called, image generator or otherwise, is how you think about design, really, in a worded or a prompt-based format, right? As designers, we've been taught to hone our skills in a very visceral way through drafting, right, to sketching and maybe modeling, and eventually go into like CAD and computer draft and computer. And by CAD, I mean everything, all computer-aided design software. But then again, there was this. Of course, there was the buzz about Chat GPT and Google Bard, and everybody's like getting scared and stuff like. So it got me thinking, like, well, what is this? I want to kind of learn. And the challenge was like the way we think for design as designers versus how AI thinks of design is what got me interested specifically in the task of visualization. I've always been a hands-on kind of guy. My process of creative exploration has always been through like I said, modeling or something. And now suddenly you have to change the paradigm. We have to explain each and every detail to this program or software to comprehend the image you have in your mind, right? So this got me fascinating, and obviously I wanted to learn more, see where the technology goes next. And the second part of the question, why not use the traditional practices? Oh, well, we still do that. As this is AI image generation tools has its own place, and what you've been doing traditionally has its own place. There are some overlaps. There may be some, what you may say, there may be some overlaps, but they have their own spaces and their own places to do what task and what time, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the most important thing is understanding that it aids onto the process, right? So on that topic of talking of the process, like how do you think these tools that delve into artificial intelligence can assist artists in general and architects? And I'm talking about artists because, like we said, you have also delved onto art before. which in fact he has a whole Instagram dedicated to this, which we're going to be sharing with you a little bit later here in the session. But how do you think it can help us to generate innovative and, you know, help us, for example, in the design process of a very complex building? Like, how do you think it can aid us specifically in that?
Yeah, so I mean, at this stage of the game, I think AI, at least the image generation ones, are really about exploring a creative idea before getting on the drawing board. I think what's up on the screen, you'd say, these are just tests when I started working with some of this is a software called Arco AI, which is a plugin to Rhino, and Revit as well. I think they've maybe added a plugin to SketchUp too. But essentially, it's like supposing you're thinking of ideas and you don't have time to model everything. And so you see the image on the left, that was on my Rhino screen, and the image on the right is what it turned out based on basic prompts, right? Like just pathway to entrance, foggy, render, cloudy, sky, moody, stuff like that. So I think AI generated tools at this point is kind of helping us explore an idea before really getting onto the drawing board. The other thing AI programs are doing relatively well is doing some sort of mood boarding. So people are doing tiers a lot. You know, we do make mood boards before we actually get into designing spaces. So if you type in a prompt for a mood board with a certain aesthetic or idea behind it, these AI programs would churn out a pretty decent mood board. But another interesting thing, just the other day I was reading, there was an article on design. I don't know if somebody on this seminar probably may have read it as well. There's an article on design talking about how Patrick Schumacher from Sahej, the architects, of course, they claim they use like most of these AI softwares, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, like you mentioned, etc., for early ideation to just come up with a larger repertoire of ideas. And sometimes they even use these concept sketches, which are directly from the AI to the client. So it's just adding another layer before you start a project. But the funny thing when I was reading the article was that most of their prompts for their own projects had the word Zahedin or in the style of Zahedin, which is an interesting cycle, right? The AI is learning the style of something, which is your own firm, which you kind of you innovate in your own firm. It's learning from that innovation and re-innovating that circle. So it was a very interesting article, and I would encourage people to read it. It's on Design. I mean, all that said, though, I think in the future, I do see AI's contribution in designing better building envelopes, increasing energy efficiencies, perhaps even assist in meaningful, VEs and so on and so forth.
Great. Also, I would like to recommend people to look up for an article that's called "The Room That Designed Itself," which talks about literally just these AI tools that generated an entire room, like from the design to the furniture to the rendering, stuff like that. So like Sahej is sharing here, I mean, there's a lot of potential right now to be using AI in architecture. And one specifically that I liked was the ability or the understanding on what to input on the engine, right? So on that topic, what do you think that is the role that, for example, computational design has in the implementation of AI? Because I know that people do that. I know that people use computational design, like, for example, Dynamo or like Grasshopper to make specific prompts or like get out with specific words. So in this case, how do you think computational design can aid in this process as well?
Yeah, so I think one thing we do at Handel Architects sometimes is, sometimes we generate these computation design outputs from Grasshopper, Dynamo, and stuff like that, and then feed those images into AI programs for us to, visualize it slightly better, or they put it in a scene, put it in a context, make a mood out of the image. We sometimes do it the other way around. Sometimes we basically put something in one of these programs as an image generation thing, and then we would investigate that idea using computational design. So it's like a back and forth between this, right? But in general, if you talk about pure programming terms, I think, I don't know if people have heard about this new job role in the market, which is, it's a buzzword. It's called an AI whisperer, right? So what basically AI whisperers do, or they're also called prompt engineers, is basically train the program with a certain data set so it outputs a certain image and or text or stuff like that. And then boy, oh boy, how much it pays. You should see it on LinkedIn. Just type AI Whisperer and you see, oh, it's crazy. It's a very vague job, but a true AI whisperer, as they call it, is probably an amalgamation of a designer, a copywriter, and a programmer. So people who are interested in computational design, you best bet that AI is going to play a huge role by you contributing to how you train or work through and what the prompts are going to be for that particular program, essentially. Kind of making sure like tree renders like a tree, or like images associated with a green balcony is not like a green painted balcony, but it's actually like a vegetated balcony, or a terrace or a veranda, stuff like that. So there's some language learning models there which you can specifically train. So that's where I think a part of computational design efforts will go in the next couple of years.
Perfect. So talking about the overall topic of like helping the ideation process and the creativity, here, for example, the 3 images that we have on screen, they are not actual furniture. Everything is generated by these engines from scratch. So specifically, we added those because, like we mentioned, here Sahej also has experience in furniture design. So I want to ask, like, has it helped you also in this process of designing furniture, like the creation overall, like you said, the mood boarding when it comes to furniture design as well?
Yeah, I think mood boarding definitely. And in terms of, the 3 images you see on the screen is generated from DALL-E. It's a free thing. Anybody who's interested in learning about it can just go on. It's free for the first 25 or 50 images or something like that. So images you see on the screen, I basically said a modern chair in the style of Eames, right? So Eames is a very famous designer, and it already started churning out in that vocabulary. Now, obviously, it's scrubbing parts of different designs from the internet and making its own unique creation. But in general, it gives you an idea which you can further explore on your own. I think we should not take the stuff which is coming out verbatim from, I don't know if verbatim is even the right term for this, but we can sort of take some inspiration, which is not too different from how we start a project. And, we have like, we take inspiration from Pinterest images, or you just do a basic Google search. So I think it adds another layer where you don't have to go through the extensive search, Google online or whatever, and it would try to at least understand what you want and churn out some images.
Yeah, absolutely. So, they say that, that if you can beat them, join them, right? So what do you think there are or what do you think are the potential challenges that architects could face? I mean, architects and designers overall, because I think that many people are starting to delve into these tools as well. What do you think are the challenges that we might start to face as we begin to incorporate the generative and like this AI engines into our work?
Yeah. Again, great question. I guess the biggest obstacle, personally, I feel, is the dilemma for us to think the way a program thinks, right? To align our vision with its own, which is basically scrubbed off the deepest parts of the internet, right? And most architects, designers, like I said, are methodists, right? We learn by drawing and modeling and spend hours and hours and nights. I'm sure everybody whoever's on this webinar would agree. We spend nights playing with like models and like all that stuff till we reach the final conclusion. There's a lot of back and forth between things, right? When you're doing a project. With AI, it's a similar process, but very different in the same thing. But you really have to do instead of going back and forth between things, you have to do a lot of play of words, right? You have to make sure that the lack of visible ability for you to do yourself, you have to put it into words, and you have to still have a lot of trial and error. Sure, the AI program can return the output very quickly, within a matter of seconds, in fact. But the struggle with you understanding what's out there and what your ideas in your mind and writing the correct prompt is where we started. There's a paradigm change, right? I'm sure all of you would also agree that most of our thoughts as designers, stem from our experiences, our observations, our travels, and our surroundings. So whenever you have a spark of an idea, it's not coming from thin air, right? So but with AI, the data set is way bigger than ours. Our data set is our circle and what we do. But the AI data set is it's massive, right? So the so-called thought can be sometimes what AI churns out could be biased, and there's a big debate about that, and we will talk about it maybe in the next few minutes. But and the last thing, which is challenging, is the issue of reliability. Well, not everything these softwares do, ChatGPT, Bard, and some images are correct or are fact. How does one deal with plagiarism, right? Who's held accountable if something goes wrong? What are the regulations on data and privacy? Those are just questions which have to be answered as in when we go through this technology. And how can we ensure AI is really free from bias, right? There are a lot of questions there which we don't know the answers for at this stage. But most tools are pretty image generation tools. We still need to do our due diligence on its pure impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the most important thing would be what you mentioned about like understanding that it's not unreliable. But at the end of the day, it's just another software, and sometimes a software that is managed by many computers at a time. So of course, like understanding that it also depends on the network connection, on the actual program itself. Like we've seen many times already in the media that, for example, like Microsoft came up with their own chatbot AI, right? And immediately it became racist or something like that because of the inputs that people are working with. So I think that's one of the biggest, most important things we can understand is that at the end of the day, what matters is our input, right? And that's not necessarily the tool itself. So we were talking the other day about how have you been able to like start planting the seed of using AI tools in your company. And I mean, also knowing that there are many companies out there who are really utilizing these tools. Do you think that AI will transform the work of the architect and the way that we work with each other and do communicate with each other once that we are like knee deep into the implementation of AI?
I mean, of course, there's going to be some every time a new technology or everything comes up, there's some ruffling of feathers. I think what AI it personally can be a very powerful tool to handle repetitive tasks and information processing. We can, we've sometimes used ChatGPT and Google's Bard to study building codes and zoning laws to give us a summary of it. But like I mentioned, at this stage, you need to still do your due diligence to make sure it's churning out the right output. So, but for example, when we're trying to go for a new project, like I'm working on this project in Miami, and I don't know what the building code and zoning thing is, sometimes I just Chat GPT or Google, and it'll give me a summary of that section, and you can keep going deep and re-answer that question into where is the section from, when was it written, blah blah blah, as opposed to you personally going find the book online, trying to find that section. It gives you the section you really need by just so that's a very interesting way AI is kind of helping to do some of these tasks. I think some agencies, at least here in the US, have also started using AI to generate zoning diagrams, right? Which is super helpful for architects to understand site-specific complexities, where you just go to the site and it'll create how many floors you can do, what's the massing, blah, blah, blah. Those have already started to happen. And this might be a recurring theme in this seminar, but I also see AI eventually making over to some like mundane tasks, like figuring out parking layouts and calculating the number of bike racks required and for compliance. And I know there's some softwares out there. So there will be a paradigm shift for sure. It's going to happen at its own pace. And, more often than not, it's going to become a part of our toolkit. And we may not even realize it,
Yeah. Definitely. I think that's the most important part. Like, let's think about how AutoCAD became like a household tool, right? Seemingly out of nowhere, right? Like we were mentioning it in the 80s, we were still drawing by hand, but then all of a sudden it became the household. Like the same thing, for example, with Revit, right? There's many companies that utilize it for everything. So I think it's very important to recognize that while still there are tools that we can like start delving onto, they're going to be definitely changing some ways that we work in the construction industry. So talking also on the topic of implementation and utilizing these tools, we cannot be talking about AI without discussing the hottest topics around it. So I which I think is a very valid discussion and conversation to have, which is the fear, right, of technology. Many people have it. Many people have been having it for decades now. So there's this main fear about getting outperformed and replaced by these softwares. So I want to know your opinion on this. Do you think that there's potential for AI to replace the creativity and the roles of architects in our industry?
Oh, yeah, hot topic, like you said. And it kind of reminds me of this article I was reading the other day in the Wired magazine. It said, I think it was titled Chat GPT has entered the classroom or something. So basically, it summarizes this account of a high school teacher who's been working for like 25 years. And, it explains her anxiety when ChatGPT was launched. Students have started copying their homework or stuff like that in ChatGPT. And well, when most people are fretting about how AI is going to take their jobs, like you said, this teacher was like, let me spend some time tinkering with ChatGPT. And she came to view it as a tool to enhance critical thinking rather than completely replace it, right? So she mentioned something really interesting. She said, AI chatbots could become calculators for writing, which is very interesting, right? I mean, you do math, you don't have to do everything. So you have calculators for it. So why can't we use these softwares instead of being inhibited by their abilities, try to use it in our creative processes, right? So that line really stuck with me. And at the end of the day, it's another tool. Another tool we have to add to our already overflowing toolkits as designers, right? It's funny. I was talking to somebody, my colleague, only the next day. You know how on resumes sometimes you ask for software. Those softwares keep that size of that list keeps increasing exponentially every year. It's crazy. You can't. It's not like you can forget the old ones. You still kind of know them, but you have to keep adding them to your little list of things to stay relevant. I mean, but on a serious level, despite these programs' ability to like produce lifelike images or its ability to spew like human-like text, at the end of the day, it's not intelligent the way people are. I'm choosing my words very carefully, right? This stage, it still needs some guidance to get things right. I mean, there's a huge debate, obviously, about the jobs, and frankly, yeah, it has the potential to affect certain industries in a very significant manner. If not now, perhaps in the near future. But I think the goal should be to work with it as opposed to getting, inhibited with it. And honestly, guys, you don't have to code or do anything to do that if you have to work with some of these softwares. You just have to be cognizant of, how to get what you wanted to get.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like we said, we are mentioning so far, at the end of the day, it's still just another tool, right? Like the same way that Revit doesn't make BIM, AI is not going to replace our work, specifically because, like, for example, in the topic of art, which you are acquainted with, let's understand that art itself is an expression of humanity, right? Like we cannot just expect something to not understand, for example, what it's like to be outside touching the rain or something like that, because these are tools that don't understand that. So maybe in the future, like far future, we'll have that. I'll be a little bit weird to have a robot to tell you like what that feels like. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a tool. And also like talking on the topic of like ethics and like the morals of using AI tools, specifically when it comes to like property of the images, intellectual property, stuff like that. What is your stance specifically? I mean, not necessarily like a hard-hitting response, but what do you think about the ethics of using these tools? Like, for example, who owns these images, right? Like, so I want to know like your stance on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing right now. The ethics, the bias or the ownership of images, that's the money question, right? I was talking to my friend the other, it's like, why is this, what's this buzz about AI? Aren't we all AI? Like our boss says something in sentences and we go to the drawing board and start drawing it, right? It's kind of interesting that it's happening like that. But jokes apart, if you use AI for like concept presentation, is it really different from inspiration, like I mentioned, from taking from stuff you find on the internet or like stuff on Pinterest and stuff like that? I mean, there are serious concerns about bias ownership, which probably will affect a lot of artists who solely work on digital art platforms online. You may have noticed if somebody in this group has played with some of these image generation tools, if you um, if you ask for an output of a particular style of an artist and a portrait or some stuff like that, there's a little tiny watermark on the side which is all blurred out. Interestingly, all image generation tools don't do well with text. They all bumble the text up. So I think there's something funny happening there. But rightly so. There, in response to that, there have been consortiums who set up safeguards to protect your work. One such group that I know of is it's called Have I Been Trained? There's a website for it, and where you can either upload your text or image to check if your images have been used by data sets or used by image generation and language learning models. But in technical terms, I think only the images which are part of the LAION 5B data set, it's like those images. So, but that's just one data set. There are way too many there were many data sets and to go through. And as layman, just making a living, it's not, I mean, they won't be able to do that. But for a moment, I'm going to step back and let's look at society and the design field in general. Like I'm going to share a personal experience. So a couple of years ago, my ex-business partner from StudioGood was searching for some furniture for a project in Delhi. And while she was doing that, she stumbled on a very peculiar design in one small, relatively shop in Delhi. And to our surprise, it was a direct copy of the chair we designed and manufactured. And when she asked the owner where he got this chair from, he was obviously being a little nonchalant and be like, try to shoo her away because, well, obviously he was because it was a direct imitation. And we were a small firm that time, and there have been so many countless imitations of famous designer products like Eames and like Noguchi and Hans Wegner and whatnot. Long story short, AI is technically imitating, not imitating, sorry, it's not imitating, it's adapting. So it's how you also adapt to it. There's a bit of a gray area there. That, as they say, imitation is the greatest form of flattery, right? But creating a style or like a standard or typology, which AI has now started to use, is it more than flattery? Is like you've completely passed that like threshold where you should be scared of it. Hey, I created a style, which now AI is using for other people. It's not a direct copy. It's not a direct copy. It'll never churn out a word-to-word image, right? Yeah. Sorry, actual project and another project. It'll always be a variation of something. So it's not too different from what we do as designers. We also inspire from something. We should not copy directly. We do not copy directly. It's interesting back and forth there. So the ethics of AI, where we're talking about it's scrubbing people's work. I mean, think about it.
Yeah, I think that this is an ongoing discussion, especially as it grows, like the implementation. I remember a couple of months ago, there was this huge movement in social media about like digital artists standing up against like the usage of AI, because most of those works were using their art, right? Like the actual art that they made to train these models. So I think that, this is our topics that we have to delve on independently on whether we utilize these tools or not, because that's going to reach us whether we want it or not. So also on the topic of like the overall implementation of AI and how it's transforming your work, for example, can you share us what AI tools have you used, and are there any that you would recommend to the audience that we have right here?
Yeah, so I like I mentioned, I've used Bard, ChatGPT for some text-based stuff like searching for zoning, searching for maybe the ADA requirements, American Disability Association. So it'll churn out the specific section you're looking for, like building codes and stuff like that. So those are some of the verbal things we've used. The other thing we've been lately using is it was on the screen a while ago, was Arco AI. There's also a plugin called Verus, Veras for Revit and Rhino. which is similar. It's a plugin to your software. So just whatever, it's kind of like Enscape or Lumion or whoever works it, except that you have prompt based and it captures a still image. Then there's DALL-E, Midjourney, which we use for ideation before the project. And Stable Diffusion, which now lately we started playing with. If you download the version of it on your desktop and not use the web browser, has a lot more capabilities there. Sometimes you draw something in Rhino and put it in Stable Diffusion just to get a first pass idea. And it could actually, what it does is creates an outline for your sketch, and it uses that outline as a black and white image, and then gives an output from there. There's a lot of inner workings technicalities happening on the backside of that, but that's how we started to use AI a little bit. And talking about, I think, the next big transformation of the next, in the next 5 to 10 years, where I see AI, I think it can have a major influence on spec writing, rendering engines, construction logistics, project management, you name it. We're already surrounded by some sort of like AI. It's only a matter of time it percolates into some of the more mundane tasks we quite frankly dislike. There's actually a term for AI which works in specific tasks, like it's called artificial narrow intelligence, called ANI, which basically refers to AI systems which are designed to perform specific tasks with very narrow capabilities. And the biggest example of ANI is Siri, Alexa, Google. It works in a particular set of what can we say, tasks. Other examples are maybe which is of ANI are like autonomous vehicles and predictive tests and stuff like that. So yeah. I mean, I just hope that we give all our boring work to AI and suddenly somewhere in the future it comes to us guns blazing, Terminator T-1000, like you give me all the boring shit, man. And they're like, oh, so you better delete this session from our history. I don't want to be the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like we were mentioning at the beginning, these AI tools and AI in general is not new, right? We've seen many implications in like the medical field primarily. I know some tools that, for example, help the visually impaired to like see things around there in the context, like they read stuff aloud. Even like, I think we all are acquainted with like saying, hey, Alexa, buy something, right? Like
I hope my Alexa
is that.
You just said Alexa. Everybody's Alexa is probably, everybody has Alexa is probably going.
Yeah, so sorry. I was already talking to you, Alexa, or like the Google Home or like the Google Assistant, right? Is Siri. So, I mean, we're all acquainted with already, but still in the construction industry, there are some still applications that are quite interesting so far. So now let's just wrapping up the talk about, professional experiences and stuff like that. I would also like to know that you, as someone who is open to continuous learning and have an open mind towards the field, in general, what advice would you give the young architects that will be facing the challenges of tomorrow? Like not specifically just to AI, but also like the challenges that we're going to be facing on overpopulation of cities, like the rising sea levels, global warming, stuff like that. What is some general advice that you would give out?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to answer the first part of it is one, just simply enjoy the process, or try to enjoy the process. We've spent long nights and stuff like that. Everybody knows that. But there will always be new things which come into the market, which will compel you to think and test your own relevance, right? It's always going to happen. That's just how things work. But have faith and keep on at it. I mean, your strength is really your endurance for your relentless creativity, right? It's kind of funny that we always thought AI would come in and take the mundane jobs or like, stuff in construction sites and stuff like that, do those things. But it's funny that AI is becoming more of a creative decision maker now, right? In the sense that I always thought it'll be the other way around. Like you would still have your creativity and you give the the work aspect of it to AI, but it looks like AI started taking a lot of the creativity part and not really doing the work aspect. So that change will keep on happening. For younger designers and architects, just be on the lookout for what these things are, because they are good. No matter what you do, they're going to be some version of it is going to be there in the future. And yes, you very rightly pointed out about rising sea levels and global warming, stuff like that. I think it's imperative for our generation to tackle those things with using traditional methods and using new methods and old methods. The fact of the matter is, no matter how you do it, that our core principle of design making a better living should always remain the same, right? So yes, we should definitely put our focus on more sustainable approaches, and we should definitely talk in our projects and make our clients realize that this is the need of the hour. We have to do these things, no matter how flashy your rendering or how flashy your proposal is. If it's not addressing the core problems, I think it's not really doing the justice it's supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, on the topic of preparing for ourselves for the next challenges, I think that is also important to understand that we cannot do it without having an open mind, right? Like understanding there are things that we don't know, that there's things that we can improve on. So yeah, I mean, thank you for that advice. And also on the topic of preparing for the future, we have here at 1:X the Master Computational Design course, which you are a part of. So as you can see here, we have a global community of mentors that will be aiding into the process of learning about computational design for a real world application. It's not just going to be theoretical, they actually going to be learning it, how to use it in the field. So as you can see here, you are one of the mentors that join us in this course. So can you share us your involvement in the Master Computational Design course and what can we expect from you as a mentor?
Yes. So I am been, as a part of the computational design course, I'm taking some session of visualization. With using visualization and using Enscape as a tool for that. So I'm teaching, the basics of Enscape all the way till, your final context-based render, and creating mood images, and just do an introduction to visualization. And hopefully by the end of the course, you would be all the computational design studies you do in the course. We basically use the output from that and create a mood for that, basically an image or something which really expresses the form in a more dressed up manner, if you may. So yeah, I have about a couple of sessions there. So whoever is interested should definitely take it up. I think we've got a fabulous team from all parts of the world, which is great. You can see, I think I'm here in New York. There's some people in UN Studio, which is somewhere in UAE, and it's a very interesting cohort. If anybody's interested in learning more about computational design and or visualization, or even BIM, building information modeling, this is a great platform for somebody to jump on board to learn new things.
Perfect. So let's just open up the floor for some questions. We can take maybe 2 questions with people open up their microphones. Otherwise, if you don't want to open up your mics, you can type them out in the chat box below. So I'm going to open up here the chat box to see some questions that we have. So there's a question here that says, what is a plugin to be used with Revit that you mentioned?
Yeah, so there are 2 plugins. I think you could use Veras, V-E-R-A-S, and Arco AI that I know of. There might be more coming in the future. But even if you don't use the plugin, but like I said, they're all, you can only do the trial version, like to pay for the full version. The trial version would have you like 10 or 15 or 20 images or something like that, which you can take out. Stable Diffusion online is completely free, but it's a web thing. And even Stable Diffusion, if you download, but you need I think I needed 20 gigs of space or 30 gigs of space to download and a pretty good graphics card. That's not a plugin, but you can download Stable Diffusion. You can churn out 2D images from SketchUp or Rhino or Revit or whatever software you use. and put it in Stable Diffusion. You'll create a line drawing of that, and you can, the prompt-based sliders in it. So that's what you could also use if you're not using plugins. And then there's obviously DALL-E and Midjourney, which are also web-based, and they're hosted on, Midjourney is hosted on Discord.
Perfect. So there's also another question here in the chat. What are the interventions of AI and machine learning techniques to reduce predicting the energy consumption of high-rise buildings? And if yes, I mean, how can we evaluate the energy consumption of high-rise buildings, and what is the process and framework for these? So, for example, here with the experience that you have in high-rise buildings, like how does your firm manages the energy analysis, and do they use artificial intelligence for this?
Not as of this moment, I would say. Not that I know of. Maybe it's a good prompt to maybe figure out if there are some overlaps there or not. I think the only way we would probably use AI is maybe some, chat GPT and stuff like that to get some inputs on, thermal characteristics in a particular environment that it could give you a fairly decent summary of. As far as we still used, our office also has built New York's largest passive house project, Cornell. That as far as I remember, we've just mostly be using Grasshopper plugins and Ladybug and stuff like that to do some of these calculations. And I think we have a specific team which works on these aspects of a project. So yeah, I don't think we've used AI yet, but I do, maybe there's something coming up.
Perfect. So in fact, when it comes to high energy performance and energy analysis and stuff like that, we had a previous webinar when it comes to that topic. Let me see who asked the questions. Chirag. So if you want to check it out, it's on our YouTube channel. Is with one of the mentors here as well, the computational design course, and we go on to talk about building engineering physics and stuff like that. So hopefully that can interest you. So we also have other questions here. What can be the suggested fields or degrees for a master's to be pursued according to the changing trends in context of like the advent of AI tools in construction? So what do you think, like from your perspective, should be taken in consideration as like a way of study for this?
I blanked out in the first half of the sentence. So is the question that what you need to do to learn AI? Is that the question? Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, like what the suggested field or degree that they can pursue to take advantage of this like changing trend in construction?
I mean, I don't know about construction yet, but in terms of architecture and design, it's pretty easy for anybody to just open up AI. It's not rocket science. It's really not.
Yeah.
I'm sure what's happening in the background is rocket science, but as a layman like me, I'm not a computational designer or somebody who codes and stuff like that. And I just got fascinated by the technology, and I just went online and saw some tutorials and YouTube videos, and there you go. And you don't necessarily need to be an expert in any of those fields. As far as if this learning is going to percolate into colleges and stuff like that, I don't know. I think in colleges also, we learned all the softwares ourselves. So it's kind of the imperatives on you to basically research what's out there. And there are thousands of programs out there, and you don't need to know all of them. But I'm saying, even if anybody on this group is interested in AI, it's pretty easy to go in and just start doing it. And in the future, it's going to get more advanced and more specific. But as of this moment, it's anybody. And it doesn't even need to be a design field.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that even if you want to like get deeper onto this, to the person that asked this question, I mean, you could consider computer science, which is like heavy on the programming and like the development of software, stuff like that. So, I mean, if that's the case with you, you're interested into delving into this topic, you could do that. Otherwise, like Sahej said, it's not necessary to be studying something specific to be using these tools. Maybe alternative like delving more into the design process itself or something like that. But yeah, I think we can go to the next question. So another question that was asked is, what are the changes in the industry that are possible due to the boom in AI, which we already talked about? So can you give us a quick rundown of what do you think could be the changes that we're going to be seeing?
Yeah, like I said, I think a lot of our current programs will have some possibilities of plugins. Like even Revit, Rhino, and 3D rendering softwares, Lumia, and all, they might have some sort of AI component to it. It's funny, Zoom has an AI component to it. Zoom would give you a summary of all your things. So these small artificial narrow intelligence, like I said, some of these ANIs will percolate into all our design softwares a little bit. And in the future, it could range from anything. Like I think somebody in the chat also mentioned, I was just going through the chat, there's software for doing parking calculations, right? Yeah. That's pretty obvious, right? I don't want to sit and do parking calculations. So I could just throw it out to, give me the most efficient layout given the bay size, given the thing, which is something we sometimes also do using computational design. You won't have to sit and make a Grasshopper script or a C# script or whatever it is. Just throw it on maybe Grasshopper as an AI plugin and just do like da-da-da-da-da, and it does it for you. I think in the next couple of years, this definitely might come through.
Excellent. So I think that's all the questions we have for today on the live session. Like we mentioned, the rest of the questions that haven't gone answered right now will be taken up later by our experts, and we'll be reaching out to you through the email that you set up for the registration for this event. So where can they find you, Sahej? Finally, where can they see your work?
Yes, I can be reached out on my website, sahejbhatia.com. So feel free to check it out. It's not fully updated, so mind me. But I also enjoy my Instagram channel. It's called The Post Urbanist, and just a brief background what The Post Urbanist, the kind of stuff I do. I was always I want to try to move away from the all black image of the architect, even though I'm wearing all black right now. So a lot of the artwork I make are just these utopian, dystopian concepts, but in a very pastel, in a pastel color tones. So it's just playing with forms and stuff like that, and I sketch it and then I put in softwares, and now I may even try AI to make some arts. But right now I'm still old school that way, because I want to keep it a little more the traditional way of keeping art. So check out The Post Urbanist on Instagram if you want, and if you have any questions for me, you can reach out to me there on my website or find me on LinkedIn, whatever you want. And thank you everybody for even listening to me blabbering about stuff. I hope some of it opened your perspective to what AI is, and there's nothing to be worried about, really, honestly.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sahej, for joining us today. I think it was very productive and interesting conversation, and hopefully everybody here can see the possible ways in which we can start changing, right? And we can start learning more. So thank you everybody for joining us. We're going to be seeing you in the next webinar, and also stay tuned for the social media link of One2X, because we have a very big announcement in the next couple of days. All right. So thank you, Sahej. Hope you have a great day, and
Thanks,
see you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one. See ya.
See ya.